This Sunday, as the year winds to a close, marked by another natural disaster and political defeats at the state capitol.
And you were overridden again and again and again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Phil Scott, the nation's most popular governor, tells us what he's thinking about presidential politics, a state legislature controlled by the left,
We have to get back to reality.
and the role he'll play ahead of the 2024 election.
I'm going to be working to try and attract more of those centrist moderates. I don't care what party you're from.
Plus, will he seek a fifth term? Governor Phil Scott, ahead on our Sunday program.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. Welcome to NBC5 In Depth. Phil Scott really should be riding high about now. The 65-year-old Republican leads a state where revenues are strong, unemployment low, and his own poll numbers are off the charts. He'll soon outline his 8th State of the State to the legislature, which has repeatedly shown its willingness of late to ignore him, especially around what level of spending and taxation he thinks Vermonters can afford. Scott is also mindful that pockets of Vermont are still reeling from the July flooding that caused more than $1 billion in damage. We'll begin there in our year-end interview at the state capitol.
Never satisfied with the pace. We want to move as quickly as possible. We have people who are still impacted by the flood, individuals, businesses, and it's just a different type of storm. I remember, I was lieutenant governor during Irene, and we had the flood one afternoon into the evening, and the next day we were out looking at the damage. The sun was shining, and we saw a lot of devastation. We saw the visibly, 38 bridges that were damaged and down, and you could see that. But here was different. This was like, we got that initial surge, but it kept raining. We had multiple rain events over the next week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So it kept adding up. It wasn't just a drip, drip, drip. It was just gallons of water.
Well, in the capital city, this is the third time it's been hit in my time, do we need to do something dramatic, something, beyond just cleaning up, something preventive?
Yes. Mitigation is going to be important. It's on one of the highest areas we're looking at in terms of recovery, because we have to go upstream and literally upstream, because we need more storage capacity. We have more intense storms than we did before, and high intensity. So we need storage areas for all this water that's bound to come.
You need federal money?
We need federal money to do some, but we're receiving some, and they had an appropriation in the supplemental that they gave a lot of money to FEMA. We're hoping to access some of that for just that reason. But any place we can find along the river corridor, and we're studying this now, we need to create more storage capacity, because that could be the answer. Just mitigating the amount of water that comes all at once, being able to flood into areas that don't have homes and businesses is important.
We're at the State House today, but you still work each day in essentially a windowless room, a large closet near the Berlin airport. You're still displaced.
Yeah, and I'm happy with that, by the way. I'm fine where I am. We are very fortunate to have a continuity of operations plan. Former Secretary of Administration Suzanne Young was relentless in making sure every agency department had a place to go in case something happened. And we all rolled our eyes thinking, what's going to happen where all of us are going to be impacted? Well, somewhat happened here.
You're moving back to the pavilion, or along with the other state departments and agencies, January?
I would say by January we should be able to move back in, waiting for mostly parts for different electrical components and so forth, but it's coming.
You've had a difficult year politically in this building, and I'm wondering how, now that some time has passed, you feel about the number of vetoes that you've had to bills you've had to reject, and you were overridden again and again and again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because what I've seen over the last 7 years is something that I highlighted from the beginning. Affordability is a big deal, big issue for us. And when I see that we're spending more than I think that we should be, that there's going to be a day of reckoning then, I have to do something about that. And in this case, I had to veto the budget. Unfortunately, they overrode that budget, and we're going to see the impacts of that in the years to come. Some of it hasn't come yet. We have a 20% increase coming in DMV fees coming January 1. And we have payroll tax that's going to become due in July. I vetoed the pension bill, and again, I was overridden. I didn't get a single vote in that respect. So, but I said we weren't going far enough. I applaud them for taking a step forward, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to. We were putting $200 million into the pension fund, and they said that was going to fix it. Well, guess what? It's not fixed, and we have another $200 million hole. So we didn't go far enough. So again, we can't go backwards, but we can look forward. Inflation has impacted everyone. So, and we don't have all the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of federal aid rolling in either. So this is going to be a tough year.
I'm wondering though, how do you come off a session like that? I mean, how does the frequency of overrides make you feel as a governor? Does it make you less interested in the next year, or do you want to stick around and fight?
No, it energizes me.
It does.
Because I know, you see the numbers. Everything I talked about during that first election for governor, the 631, if you remember, 6 fewer workers in the workforce every day, 3 fewer kids in our schools every single day. That's come to fruition. Look at the census, the latest census as compared to 10 years ago. It's dramatic. I mean, the number of people over the age of 65 has grown astronomically. The number of people under 17 has been reduced by about 17,000. And then they have the workforce in the middle, those in the 40 to 55 range, that has decreased as well. So the numbers don't lie. And that's what we're facing today. And we have to make it, we need more people in the state to fix all our problems. I mean, we need more taxpayers, not more taxes. So what we need to do is attract more people into the state. How do we do that, right? Well, I don't think it's raising the tax burden. I don't think that's not a recipe for attracting more people into the state. So we have to live within our means. We have to make it as affordable as possible. We need more housing to bring more people in as well, and we're working on that. But it's just the fundamentals that we need to follow through on. And the legislature has worked with us on some issues, and again, I'm grateful for that. But a lot of them haven't been through the tough times. They are brand new. They just know the Leahy dollars that have flowed in for many, many years, and all the ARPA money and all the bipartisan infrastructure money that's rolled in, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's all they know. Well, that's come to a stop. And again, thankfully we have that, and we've been able to put the match money aside for that, and that will help us through what could be tough times in the years ahead. But we got to go back to, we don't have the extra money coming in.
Housing is going to be job one. In January, the Natural Resources Board report is now out, recommends some significant changes that sound familiar to some of the ideas you've advanced in terms of reforming Act 250 and exempting areas of the state that have robust local planning and zoning. What do you think about this report and those recommendations?
Well, again, the report that just came out, that's been about 2 years in the making.
Right.
And it's a diverse group that came together and made these recommendations. It wasn't focused on housing. It was just focused on Act 250. We'll take anything in that report that will advance housing and expedite housing, and we'll utilize it. But we have some other ideas as well, and we're going to put that in with another package because housing is critical for us. We're going to have to create more housing. I think we all agree on that, and we're way behind. We put a lot of money into it over the last number of years, but at this rate, it's not going to help us because all these projects are slowed by the regulatory process.
So Act 250 is essential?
That's part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's other local regulations as well. It's not all Act 250. That's not going to fix everything. There's going to be other regulatory zoning issues and so forth that we need to, and it doesn't have to be, for those who fear changing Act 250, changing zoning, doing all these things is just going to turn Vermont upside down. Let's put some guardrails on it. Let's not do it forever, but we need to jumpstart this. I think we all agree.
What is the theme going to be for your State of the State address in a couple of weeks?
I don't think it's much different than what I've talked about before. Affordability, growing the economy, making Vermont more affordable, and protecting the most vulnerable. All three of those are still applicable today, as applicable as it was back 7 years ago.
But you're expecting a different result this time.
Well, I think we over 6 of the 7 years we were able to contain tax growth. Well, we didn't have that. We didn't grow fees like they did last year. They took a big jump, a huge jump last year that's going to impact us. But again, we have to get back to reality.
Coming up, is there anything he can do to stop another big property tax increase stemming from public schools? And we'll talk campaign politics, including his pick in the 2024 Republican presidential race and more when we return. In 2 weeks, Phil Scott will again lay out his agenda for the state to a joint session of the legislature. Safe to say the high cost of living will be front and center. More from our conversation this week in his ceremonial office at the Capitol. Your tax commissioner in his annual letter projects that property taxes are going to rise nearly 20% in the coming year, fueled by projected increases in K-12 education spending. Is there anything you can do to prevent that?
Yeah, well, we're going to try and do everything we can. It's going to be difficult just because of the structure of our school funding here in Vermont and our approach. It's all locally controlled. A lot of folks don't understand, we really don't have much control over the money. It comes into the supervisory districts and schools to determine what their budgets are going to be. Then they send that bill into Montpelier, and it goes thrown into a giant pot, and then we pay it out from there. And when it's a self-leveling fund, so when there needs to be more money, we just raise property tax rates to cover it, and that's what we're doing here. But you look back when I first came into office. We were spending about $1.5 billion at that point. Now it's over $2 billion. I mean, that's an incredible increase in a short period of time. And so there are ways that we've had a lot of ideas over the last 7 years. I don't think any of them have been received well by the legislature, but maybe we can work together on this. And if we need, again, we need more money for education, we may have to take it out of a different pot. But we have to do it without raising taxes, because the overall affordability of the state, robbing Peter to pay Paul, isn't going to help. Finding other ways to tax Vermonters is just going to make the problem worse. So we have to separate everything now. And I do this personally. I've talked about this before, but I ask myself, do I want it or do I need it? And you have to satisfy the needs first and the wants second.
Do we need to make some reforms in our criminal justice system in light of our fentanyl problem, in light of what some have called the revolving door in our courts?
Yes. Basically, we need to reevaluate what we've done over the last few years and maybe roll some of those back. The pendulum has swung too far, and I believe it needs to come back to the center. The catch and release programs that we have now, I think, is something that we have to reflect on. Raise the age, who can be charged as an adult, needs to be looked at. And there's some other areas that we should contemplate. Fentanyl and xylazine have changed the game. It's less expensive, it's more prevalent, and it's more dangerous. And we need to, again, look at all four legs of the stool. Prevention is something that I think that we still need to do more of. And when I speak of prevention, I'm talking about keeping people from getting addicted to begin with. Some look at prevention as preventing death. We also need to look at treatment, recovery, and the fourth leg of the stool is enforcement. And I don't think we do enough of that. And I'm not saying we can go back to doing everything revolving around enforcement with drugs, but we need to do more to shut off the supply.
Let me go back to something you said earlier about, you've had more than 40 vetoes so far, and you were overridden a lot this past year, and you said that it makes you want to stay and fight, as opposed to go back to private life, go back to your firm. Does that mean that you have a fifth term in you?
Oh, we'll see. I mean, I'm going to get through this year and try and do the best we can during this legislative session. Take one session at a time. I just would like to put ourselves on a path for sustainability in Vermont. And I think Vermonters appreciate that as well. And we'll just have to see what happens after this session.
Well, you watch these national polls. The governors are rated every several times a year, and Morning Consult has you as the nation's most popular governor in his or her home state. So you must feel the support of the people, and yet I'm wondering if your approach in dealing with the legislature is going to be more aggressive, given what didn't work last year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they have the supermajority. They have the power. They can override. They've proven it time and time again over the last year. They can do anything they want. So all I can do is make my argument to them, hopefully convince a few legislators, maybe those legislators that had campaigned with my photo on their campaign literature and had identified all the same issues that I'd identified and put them on their mailers. Maybe they'd take a step. And it's hard, it's difficult. I've had to make some tough choices in my political life, and it's uncomfortable, but for the right reasons, to support your constituents instead of your party. And that's what I'm asking legislators to reflect on that. Support your community, support your constituents. Forget about your party. And it's not easy. It takes some courage to do so.
Well, in 2024, will you try to recruit more? I think you said they don't have to be Republicans, they need to be centrists.
Centrists. We need more moderate centrists.
Well, what are you going to do about that?
Well, I'll be working, regardless of what I do, I'm going to be working to try and attract more of those centrist moderates. I don't care what party you're from. I just need you to have some common sense and understand, how to balance a checkbook.
But you've not made up your mind
I have
about
not.
24.
I have not.
You're open-minded,
I am.
either way.
Yep.
The race for president is starting to get serious, and the GOP has a decision to make. Are you a Nikki Haley person?
I could be a Nikki Haley person, sure.
You don't endorse her?
I wouldn't want to hurt her at this point in time. I mean, I don't think this is a primary, and those who come out in primaries are typically those more to the right or the left, either primary Democrats more to the left or Republicans more to the right. I think I can only hurt her at this point. But I like a lot of the candidates who are running. I like Chris Christie. I think he's entertaining, and he is holding former President Trump accountable.
The Vermont Democrats, though, have ripped you for flirting with Christie or Haley, who they call, all in for Trump, and now trying to cash in on the anti-Trump, spreading untruths about trans kids and so forth. I mean, you'd be comfortable with that, or is it just that she's not Donald Trump?
Nikki Haley, I think, has a lot to offer. I knew her as when she was governor. When I first came into office, she was governor of South Carolina before she took that role as ambassador to the United Nations, and she did very well for her state. And I think she's open-minded, and she's a good person, and I think she has all the ingredients needed to be president. But so doesn't Chris Christie. So didn't Doug Burgum, Asa Hutchinson. I mean, there are a host of other candidates out there. But at this point in time, it appears that Nikki Haley is gaining ground, and we'll see what happens when the field is narrowed. When we have one candidate on one side, and when I say that, two candidates, because former President Trump is going to stay in this, obviously, until the very end. But we'll see what happens when there's just two standing, and we have a Nikki Haley or Chris Christie or whoever it might be on one side versus Donald Trump.
What's your hope then? What's your hope for the new year?
In terms of
our state,
that we focus on the fundamentals again, that we look at making Vermont more affordable and attract more people in an expedited way, and that we are realistic about what we can afford and what we can't. And I think that that's something that Vermonters hope we do. They're counting on us, and we need to follow through. And put party aside, put the politics aside. I detest politics in some respects. I can do it, but I don't like it. I think we can do better, and I think that if we can just treat each other better with more respect and civility, not just in politics, but throughout, we can be a welcoming state for many.
We're a week from Christmas. Have you selected your gift for Mrs. Scott?
I have not. This is sneaking up on me. It's a little bit early this year. Once again.
No, you have no idea?
I don't.
Okay.
Or my mom either.
Oh,
so
don't want to forget that
yes.
one. What do you hope for under the tree? And you can't say darn tough socks or a case of motor oil.
I really do not need anything. I honestly don't. And I'm pretty content with what I have, and I'm very fortunate.
Governor, thank you.
Thank you.
So the 2024 legislative session will kick off at 10 a.m. Wednesday, January 3rd, with the governor's State of the State address the following afternoon. Of course, NBC5 will have live coverage and reaction. Before we go, another look at the lighting of the menorah outside the state capitol in Montpelier this week. The governor on hand to help celebrate the 8 nights of the holiday. The menorah positioned right next to the state Christmas tree under the Golden Dome in this season of light. That's our program for this Sunday. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. For all of us here at NBC5 News, thank you.